Hi, I'm Sue with Woman of Noble Character, and I am so excited to have with me today Shelley Hitz. Shelley is an author coach, and artist who empowers you to share your story in creative ways. She has books, art classes, and is an overall just wonderful and talented gal. So, welcome, Shelley, and I welcome you to tell us a little bit about you, your business, and your ministry.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's a loaded question.
It is, it's a lot, but feel free to share whatever you'd like so that our audience can get to know you a bit.
Yeah, so I never set out to be an author. I never dreamed of being an author, never thought I was an artist, and here I am now doing that. I went to medical school and I was licensed as a physical therapist and I practiced for 12 years. And so I was in the medical field, never ever dreamed I'd be in a creative field now, not only one creative field, but two creative fields, and who knows what God will do next. But it was in 2011, I resigned my physical therapy job and went full-time in our ministry and business. So my husband and I both do this full-time. We have our publishing company, Body and Soul Publishing, where we have over 50 books, and most of them are our own books. I personally have written and published over 40 books. And I run an academy for authors online. It's called Author Audience Academy, where I help Christian nonfiction authors write, publish, and market their books. And then in the last year and a half, God has added art into the business and what I do. I started teaching art classes about a year ago, and now I have 24 classes that I've created, and the list keeps growing. So it's really fun. I'm a creator, obviously, and that's the way that God has created me to be. But I'm also an encourager. I love sharing and also get to speak at events at times, and just really am honored and privileged that the Lord uses me in the way that he does, because I would have never, ever dreamed that I'd be doing what I'm doing today.
Absolutely. It's so funny when we look back, we think we have our lives planned out, but God has other plans for us.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes we just can't even begin to dream what he has in store for us. And it's usually way better than what we could have come up with ourselves.
Right. So true.
So tell me a little bit about your family and where you live.
So we live in Colorado Springs, and my husband and we have not been able to have children. We did have one miscarriage, but God has just blessed me so much by giving birth to so many books and helping others give birth to books. And so he's really just used that in such an incredible way. And I would not be doing what I'm doing today if God had given us children. And so I know I have the gift of time, and I don't take that lightly.
Absolutely. I'm sorry for your loss. I can understand. I had two myself, and you don't understand why when you're going through it, but as you said, God has other plans, and it's because he had something else in store for you. So.
Yeah, and that could be an entire interview just talking about my journey through all of that, and what God has done. And it's been a lot of healing, a lot of grieving, a lot of crying and screaming and kicking. And, it's not a pretty process when you're going through a grieving process, but I really feel like I've reached a place of peace. And, occasionally, like Mother's Day or, different times, it's hard. But that's the way it is. When you've lost someone or when you've lost something very precious to you, it's not like one and done. It's not like you just grieve and it's over. It's a process. But God has me in a good place, and I'm moving forward with where he has me now.
That's wonderful. That's great. Would you share a little bit about your testimony or how you came to know Christ? I don't know, were you raised in a church? Tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I always say I have so many different testimonies. I think we all should. It's like an ongoing testimony of what God continues to do through our lives. But in the very beginning, I was born and raised in the church, so I feel like I was pretty much in the church from day one. My dad was a pastor. And so the very first week of my life, I was in church. I went to all the youth camps, all the conferences, all the different events and things, and had, solos in the children's musicals and, just super involved in everything, but reached a rebellious stage in my high school years. And it was during that time that my dad and mom had an offer to actually move from Pennsylvania to Ohio, and my mom would actually come on staff with my dad as the music pastor. And it was a really great opportunity for them. And they really felt like it was what God was calling them to do. But I was a junior in high school, and I was like, you promised me we would stay here until I graduated. Right. I was in running for valedictorian. I had all my friends. I was in all these activities. And I was like, I am not leaving. And it was the first time I saw my dad cry, because he knew that's what God had for them. And he said, if you do not want to move, we will not move. And he gave us full control of that decision. And so my mom later, she's like, Shelley, why don't you just at least take a trip? Why don't we take a trip, at least visit? You don't have to make any decisions, just at least see what it's like. And to this day, I cannot tell you what changed my mind except for the Holy Spirit. But after we visited, I was like, okay, I'm willing. So we tried out, my parents were accepted, and we moved in the middle of my junior year, which typically would be the most horrible thing in your life. But it ended up being one of the best things. Not only was that I met a bunch of really amazing Christian kids in an organization called Youth for Christ. They were truly living for their faith. And it was the first time I truly met a Christian teenager, like in youth group before. That's where I learned to smoke. That's where I learned to steal. Like, that's where I learned to, like, it was not a positive experience. And so to meet people, the very first day I was at school inviting me to Bible studies, I was like, who are you?
That is and incredible.
And I recommitted my life to Christ at the end of my junior year at a Youth for Christ concert. And it was just an amazing thing. Not only that, they had a much better academic program there, and it prepared me for college. And I would not have been prepared. Our academics were not good. Even though I was running for valedictorian, it wouldn't have mattered if I would have gotten valedictorian if I wouldn't have been prepared for college. So God just did so many things through that moment. And to this day, I know that God brought us to Findlay, Ohio for, just for, if for nothing else, it was for what he wanted to do in my life.
What a great story. And you're right. So many youth groups really are not great examples of living your life for Christ. So it's wonderful that you were able to connect with one that put you in touch with others that were living for Christ. Where in Pennsylvania did you live?
We lived outside of Pittsburgh, a small town called Kittanning. So it was on the western side of the state.
I have family from the Pittsburgh area.
Oh, okay.
So I'm quite familiar with it. We spend a good amount of time out there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. How do you mesh your faith with your businesses with the art classes and the author coaching? How do you fit them together?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing because initially with my author coaching, I kept it fairly general, but people would know, like in my bio and everything, I would talk about it, and they would know because I've primarily published Christian books. So I couldn't hide it, which is good. I mean, I didn't want to, but I kept it kind of general at first. And it was the summer of 2015 where I remember my husband sent me an article. I think it was from John Piper, and it just pierced my heart. And I know that some people are called to the workplace and to be a light and to be an example in the secular workplace. But at that moment, like, God has given me so much heart for ministry, and my husband and I have done a lot of ministry together. We were missionaries for 2 years. We've been in youth ministry for years, and speakers, and there's just so much that's in me ministry related. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I always felt that tug. And everyone has to really seek the Lord on what is it for you? What is it for your business? Because it's not the same for every business. Right. And when I read that article, he talked about straddling, trying to have one foot in both worlds. And that's exactly what I was trying to do. And through a course of time, the Lord really showed me that I was to start really having my author coaching be for Christians. And I don't know. At first I thought this is going to ruin my business because, how many Christian nonfiction authors really are there? And all my internet marketing friends were like, don't do it. It's not going to work. It's too small of a niche and you're going to alienate people. And one of my friends, she's also a business coach, but she was a friend for me at the time. She's like, Shelley, it's like a magnet. There's going to be some people that are super attracted to you and others that are going to be repelled. And if you don't take a stand for anything, then it's just going to blend in with everyone. And the business coach I was working with at the time, she was like, Shelley, what would it be like if you could open your webinars in prayer? And I got chills. I was like, oh, that would be awesome. I would love that. And so I really just decided to take that step, and anyone is welcome into my author coaching program. Just know that I'm going to share, scriptures at times. I'm going to share from a biblical worldview. I'm going to pray. And yet those that are Christians are just, it's like a breath of fresh air for them. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is so refreshing. And like to be able to integrate ministry with practical teaching, it's been really, really powerful, because what I realized is a lot of people are stuck in writing or in creative endeavors. And part of that is mindset. And a lot of it is spiritual battle. And so if you're not addressing the spiritual side, especially for Christian authors, it's going to really leave this big gaping hole of something that needs to be addressed that's not being addressed. So I've really found it to be super, super powerful. And then with my my art on Instagram, I've been able to share my testimony in captions. Like I'll letter something or I'll paint something, and then I'll be able to share something in the captions. And it's been very powerful just to see people respond to that. And it's always evolving. It's always something new, but it's been very powerful.
That was one of the things that attracted me to your site and to your offerings, was that you boldly live your faith. And that is refreshing, because too many people who are operating online businesses and even online ministries sometimes almost take a step back because they don't want to be perceived in one way or another. But it's exciting and refreshing and simply wonderful when you can make your faith such an integral part of your offerings. So.
Yeah, and it's really rewarding. I honestly wonder if I'd still be doing it now if I hadn't integrated those two things, because it really changes the whole thing for me and makes it so much more rewarding for me to be able to bring the two together, and it makes it much more successful for the authors I work with.
Right, and you don't have two separate personas. You're what you're offering to authors that is secular, and your faith. It's just a beautiful melting of the two. That's awesome. If you could give one tip or piece of advice to our audience about how to live their faith through their career or business, what would it be?
Just to be authentically who God has created you to be. I think so many people see Christians as like the bullhorn on the corner. You need to be this, you need to do that, like judging everyone and what are you doing? It's like, but when you live authentically who God has created you to be, and you show up as your authentic self, the gifts and abilities God has given you, and you really have that connection with the Lord. So you're not just running on empty, but you have that connection. People are going to see that in you. They're going to see something different. They're going to ask you for things, or, come up and want to talk to you more. And, and that's going to look different for everyone. It's going to look different for every person. Like how I show up authentically as me is going to look different than you. Right. And so, I think just that authenticity is what so many people crave. And when we put on this persona, when we put on this thing of like, I have to be this person or this perfect thing, or I have to go to work and just put on this work mask, it's like, people can read through that and they can see that that, I don't know, fakeness or, whatever it is. But when you're just being authentically who you are, and that comes from a place of healing. So if you haven't had healing from past stuff, if you haven't addressed things that are coming, over you, I have a book called Broken Crayons Still Color, and I talk about really just being free of the shame of our past and really helping people like become free so they can then share their stories. And when we still are shackled by stuff in the past, we're not going to be able to show up as our authentic self because we have so much shame and fear and things. And so sometimes it does take looking deeper and, going deeper with the Lord to really be that person, that shining light, that example, that joy. When you bring joy to a place, it's like people see it.
Right.
And you can't fake that.
No, and people can connect with it where holding back or that fakeness is, it's actually just as revealing because people can see right to it that you're not being who you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Especially the millennials, they see right through it, like bang, it's like, wow, they can read people, and they want that authenticity, but I think we all yearn for it.
Right. But I do think you're right. The millennials are a little more adept at picking up on that and seeing fakeness. So you already answered my next question, but I'm going to dovetail on it. I was going to ask what came first, the art or the writing. And you mentioned that the writing came prior to the art. How do they feed into each other? Are they interconnected at all, your two different parts of your business?
Yeah, so I published my first book in 2008, and then it was in, 2016, so about a year and a half ago, I was writing my book, Broken Crayons Still Color. That was not a book I actually even came up with the idea about. It was not a book I wanted to write, but it was a book I knew I needed to write. And I put it off for almost a year. And I am a get it done type person. I mean, I'm a prolific creator. So for me to not get something done, it was like, there's something wrong. There's a reason. And it was just because it's pretty much like my whole life right there, in a book. And I'm like, Lord, I've already written about all these things in other books. Isn't that good enough? But I'm seeing how God's using this book and it's powerful. But I was writing that book and I wanted to have adult coloring pages in the book because Broken Crayons Still Color. It just makes a really, good sense. The, coloring was really popular at the time. And so I was thinking about who I could hire, what I could do. And I started researching, and it was just kind of hard to really find who could do that. And I asked a few people and the doors closed. Finally, I just sensed the Lord saying, you do it. I'm like, me? I'm not artistic. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this. And I just couldn't shake the feeling. And so I did a little bit of research. And at the time, there was not very much very many trainings or information on how to do it or what to do. And I just sat down one day finally, and I set out a couple broken crayons in front of me. And I just wrote, I wrote the first coloring page, Broken Crayons Still Color, and with some other things. And it just came out. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And, but that's what really got me into lettering, because I started researching. As I was researching, I'm a avid learner. I love learning. So I was researching all this, and it got me into to lettering. And I started discovering all these lettering artists on Instagram, and I was fascinated. Well, when I was younger, I would get 100% in penmanship. I was the type of person that would, do the block letters in my notes. I grew up before, you did probably did too, before cell phones and all of that. So, there's signs that I would really enjoy lettering, even when I was younger. But I just dove in and I just love lettering. And so I started learning on Skillshare, and I love Skillshare. It's a online learning platform, and you can just pay one fee, kind of like Netflix, and you get access to all the classes. well, some of the Instagram artists were teaching classes on there. So I started getting on there. Well, last December, they said, if you publish a class this month, you'll get a 1-year free membership. Plus we guarantee a certain amount, $100 or something, if you do, these things. And I was like, I've been creating online courses and classes forever. Like, that's one of the primary gifts God's given me, is teaching. I'd learned so much just learning lettering myself. And I was like, oh, I kind of wish that, there was some of these classes out there. So the first class I did was on easy coloring book design, on how to create your own coloring pages. And I ended up creating 3 classes, because, you have to create your design, you have to digitize it, and then how to sell it on products, because I did that with my Broken Crayon Still Color book and design. So anyways, that first month I published 3 classes and I got a $500 check. I was like, oh, I could actually make money on this. Not only did I get the full year membership, but I got like income. And so I was like, oh, I think I could actually maybe do this. So I've continued to create classes. And like I said, now I have 24. And it all started, though, with my book, Broken Crayon Still Color, the book that I didn't want to write. And it was like, the Lord was like, Shelley, by that act of obedience, I've been blessing you with so many things in so many different ways. And sometimes, that simple act of obedience can lead to so many other things that we never even knew were even there.
Absolutely. That's great. What I was going to comment, your lettering is absolutely gorgeous, because of course I stalk not only your website, but your Instagram and everywhere. And it's absolutely brilliant. I am not blessed with a lettering skill. Even when I taught online art classes, lettering was something that I struggled with. So you were all self-taught.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really fabulous. So it's another one of those hidden gifts that God had in there for you.
I know. And like, I had no idea it was even in there. So, I really believe every person is creative. We're called to create. We have, we're created in His image. He was a creator, God is a creator. And so we're all creative. It's just going to look different for each of us. Some of it's music, dance, cooking, there's so many different ways we can express our creativity, but sometimes we're too afraid to be a beginner and to even try, that we will never discover those things. And I had to allow myself the permission to be a beginner at something again. Like, when you are already a certain place in your career and you've already accomplished so many things, it's kind of hard to humble yourself. When I go back to the beginning of my Instagram account, I'm like, oh my gosh. And even like the coloring book pages in my book, I'm like, oh, I would do those completely different now. But the Lord's like, don't change them. That's the whole topic of the book, Broken Crayon Still Color. That's part of your story. That's part of, how art was birthed in you. And so just embrace those imperfections. And of course, a year and a half later, I would do it different,
But it is part of your story.
Yeah.
It's important that it's shared. Yeah. And you think of all the people who are missing incredible opportunities because they're afraid, of being a beginner again, as you mentioned, or because they're afraid of what if I fail, or the what ifs. So
yeah, and working through that messy, like, beginning stage of learning anything, where everything just kind of looks kind of it's like, yeah, you have to kind of work through that stage and be okay with that, and realize, like, yeah, sure, not everything's going to be for me, but I see so many people give up, I feel, too early. And even with writing, like, not pushing through some of the doubts and the perfectionism and the comparison and all of these mindset issues that hold us back so many times.
Absolutely. And then I see that you offer classes both in person and online. What do you enjoy most about teaching others?
I just love being able to share something that I've learned. And there's something about just compiling a process to help others. And it's just been interesting, like, as I've been doing these Skillshare classes, and now they're also available on my website, I I've gotten a lot of feedback and confirmation, just even that God's gifted me with teaching. Not everyone is gifted in teaching. Not everyone is meant to be a teacher. And so, and for people to say, oh my goodness, this really helped me, or I really finally understand this, or this finally makes sense to me, or thank you so much. This was such a fun, relaxing class, you know, even things like that, because art has been such a form of self-care for me.
We were just talking about teaching in person and the rewards that it brings. So thank you for that, Shelley. You mentioned before the story of how your book, Broken Crayon Still Color. I absolutely love that title. Tell us how that name came to be and what readers can find in that book.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, it wasn't even my idea, but I believe the book title is one of the reasons it sells so well, because it's such an intriguing title. But I had actually posted something on Facebook, and it was a social media image, like a meme, a quote, and it just said "Broken Crayon Still Color." And then in the caption, I shared a little bit about my testimony, and that was that. Well, anyways, my publicist at the time, we were talking, and she's like, Shelley, we've got to get that book out. We've got to get it to more people. And I'm like, well, which book? Because I have over 40. And she's like, that book, Broken Crayon Still Color. I'm like, oh, that's not a book. That was just a quote graphic on social media. And she's like, well, then you've got to write that book. I'm like, I have too much else going on.
Right.
It's just too much. Like, I've written about all that kind of stuff in my other books, but she really was like, you need to write that book. Well, then someone else, I don't know if I mentioned it somehow in one of my author coaching calls or something, but people were like, Shelley, you need to write that book. So finally I started to write the book in 2015 and had a working first draft, and then it just stopped. And that's not like me. This is the only book out of over 40 that's ever happened. And I put it off for about a year. And so then it was in 2016, I finally finished the book, and it was really 5 months of some of the hardest times of my life. And I've been through a lot. Like my grandma was murdered. I've been sexually abused. You know, there's a lot of stuff. And, I talk about some of these things in the book, but, those 5 months, it was almost like I was walking through just a really dark time. And I really believe it was a spiritual battle because of what God wanted to do with the book. And so I really had to push through to get the book done. And I ended up, for accountability purposes, writing the book through with a beta group. So I had a beta group of people, and I would send them one chapter every week, and I do one video every week, one coloring page every week, one fill in the blank viewer's guide every week, one PowerPoint every week. I had a lot of stuff that I had to do for every single chapter, because there's a lot of interactive content in it. But having the beta group helped me, and I was finally able to publish it in November of 2016.
That's fabulous. I have not yet read it, and I intend to read it. It is on my Christmas wish list.
Oh,
and I was not
awesome.
familiar with it until I came to know you and your site, and I just thought, yeah, this is fabulous. And we're all broken, but we all have such incredible value and so much to offer that God is just waiting for us to use on his behalf. So I'm very excited to get my hands on that and read that book. I'm sure that it brought a lot of emotions for you in a very difficult time, as you mentioned, going through it. But coming out the other side, I bet your faith was stronger, your walk was stronger, and you were stronger.
Yeah, and the book is meant to be interactive, so I created about a 35-minute video for every chapter. So a lot of the content is in the videos. I really recommend, if anyone gets it, to watch the videos. They're intended also for group study. But in the videos, I think I cried in just about every video. That's just who I am, and that's who God created me to be. And I was going to record them in a professional studio later, and the Lord was like, no, what you've done enough. It's good. Just move forward with this. But what I really found is I had 150 people in the beta group with me, about 50 to 75 that were really active. And what I found is when I went through the beta group with with people, and I would give the video live in the private Facebook group every week, and I would see their comments and their interaction. I really saw that God was bringing healing, and part of it was just my own, like God's given me a gift of vulnerability. And one of my reviewers said, it's not tabloid-ish. It's not like a tabloid. It's done in a very, I just said it's done in a very good way, but it's in a way that people know. Like, I struggled with a pornography addiction for 2 years as a Christian woman, married. And I talk about that, and, it's just some of the things that I dealt with and that I thought disqualified me from ministry. And what I found is that a lot of the people going through the beta group with me were able to deal with some of the skeletons in their closet, some of those things, those regrets from the past, those mistakes that they made, those sins, those things that maybe they'd even asked forgiveness and been forgiven for, but we're still holding on to the shame and the regret. And people were, getting free. And what I realized halfway through was the Lord's like, Shelley, this is not just for you to share your story. It's to empower others to share their stories. So I have a podcast, Broken Crayons Still Color. And on the podcast then is where other people share their stories. And the very first podcasts were people in my beta group. Someone shared for the very first time publicly, she's in her 60s, that she struggled with an eating disorder and how God is setting her free. Someone shared about panic attacks, and, she never wanted to share that publicly because she's in Christian ministry, and, just people getting free to share their stories, but in a way that's giving hope and life, and offering someone else that's struggling with some of those same things, like, oh, like, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that has a bunch of stuff, that I'm dealing with. And it is possible to be free. It is possible to have healing. It is possible to reach that other side. If Shelley can do it, if Jennifer can do it, if this, and it's just like, it's been such a neat journey because it was not for me.
When you're vulnerable, you invite others to be vulnerable. And that's a great example with all the stories that were shared. You look at the great names in the Bible, and even the smaller names, Rahab, a prostitute,
right,
is from the lineage of Jesus. So that old saying that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. We all have skeletons in our closet. We all have sinned, but there is a bigger picture, a bigger goal, and there's often a story to share with others that needs to be told. So I am just so blessed to hear your story and your journey and how God has used you, broken crayons and all. That's wonderful.
Yeah, Revelation says we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb, which is Jesus, and the word of our testimony. But so many of us have been shut up by the enemy. We have been quieted. We've been, told don't talk about those things. And yes, you don't tell every dirty secret. Some things you don't ever talk about publicly. But there are certain times that the Lord wants us to share our testimony so that we can overcome the enemy, so we can share hope, so we can share with others the freedom we have. And that's part of like what I was talking about earlier, like being able to show up as authentically you and not hiding and not hiding the gifts. We're to shine our light. We're to be a light on a hill and not to hide, but to shine. And so, it's such an amazing thing. And it is a journey, sometimes, a long journey to get to that place. And I'm still in it. I mean, I'm still working through stuff.
Absolutely. We all are. I want to jump back just a moment to your work with authors. You work with authors, you work with aspiring authors. What would you say would be the first step that someone needs to take when they're thinking about writing a book?
I have a free webinar on my website called 3 Book Writing Formulas Every Nonfiction Author Needs to Know. And that's usually where I have people start. And it comes with brainstorming your topic, being able to write an outline, and then really being able to set up a plan of how you're going to write your book in the season of life you're in right now. It's going to be different for everyone. And that's really a place that I recommend starting, because if sometimes you have a million topics that you're thinking about, but you really need to think about, is this a passion book, just a book that God's called you to write? Is this a book you really want to sell well and have, income? Then if so, you need to be doing some market research to really determine what topic to write about. And then just really getting some outlining in place, even if, like in the writing world, they call some people pantsters, like flying by the seat of your pants. So some people are pantsters and they don't like outlining. But even if you have a rough outline, it really helps overcome writer's block, because then you always know what you're going to be writing next. You always know, like, this is the story I'm going to tell next. This is the situation I'm going to write about next. And even if you just outline the next section that you're going to write, so before you write it, say, okay, this is kind of the path that I'm going, and it can change. That's the beauty. But those are just a few things that I really recommend.
That's great, and that's great advice. I'm going to include the link to that free training below this video on the site. So if anyone wants to check that out, they can hop on and take a look, for any of the aspiring writers out there.
Definitely.
So you've written over 40 books already. Do you have plans for more books?
I think, right now I'm working on a short Kindle book that's going to be about lettering. And that's a book that I'm planning to have permanently free. So that's a marketing strategy where then, people can find the book and then find my other trainings, my other classes, that sort of thing. Hopefully that will be finished in the next month or so. And then I don't know what will come about it, but I really think the workshop that I gave, The Art of Prayer, I really feel like the Lord's leading me to make that into a book as well. But I think that one's going to take longer. It's going to be a longer process. Some of my books I get done really quick, but this one I think is going to be longer. So it's probably going to be a year or more, out. So it's going to be a while. And in between, the Lord may give me other things. So
like we said, we never know. Whatever plans we make, God has something better in store for us. So
yes.
Do you have a favorite Bible verse or even book of the Bible?
Yeah, so I would say, like, my life verse is Isaiah 61:1, where it talks about that, Jesus has come to set the captives free, heal the brokenhearted. And, I live by that verse because of all that he's done in my life and how he has healed my broken heart and he has set this captive free. So that's pretty much my life verse and what I really live by. And, the verses for my business come from Matthew 5. I think it's 14-16, where it says, we are to, be a light on a hill, and we're to let our light shine, not so people can say, wow, look how cool Shelley is. She's published over 40 books. But it says, so that they may glorify your Father who is in heaven. And so to bring glory to God with all the gifts and abilities that he's given us, that's why we're to let our light shine.
Absolutely. That's great. I don't know that I particularly have a life verse. There are so many, and it depends on the season that I'm in, or even the day. I have, well, you can't see from this side, but little notes all over behind my desk here with different bits of scripture that encourage me. And some days you need one more than you need another. But he always knows which one to put before me.
Yeah. And that's the way it is with me. I mean, that's just kind of like the foundational verse, and then there's always more,
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you have the Kindle book coming up on lettering and the new course of art and praying. Anything else that's on the horizon for you? Anything else we can expect from you?
It will be really interesting just to see what this next season brings. I have just launched a new brand called Your Creative Adventure, and it's yourcreativeadventure.com. So now I have my own membership site where I house all of my art classes, as well as you can find them on Skillshare. So with a new brand and a new website and my own member area, it really offers so many more opportunities. And one thing I would love to do, it probably will not be for another 3 months or so, if, and maybe not even then, we'll see what the timing brings, but I would love to do collaborative art classes. So bring in experts that are doing stuff that I'm not an expert or don't have, knowledge in, and do collaborative classes and then host those in my member area. I'm going to be doing more in-person art workshops next year. I've been invited to speak at a Christian artist conference. So I don't know. I mean, they say, they say to, have this 5-year business plan. I'm like, my business looks completely different than it was a year ago. So it's really hard. I really feel like the Lord is just telling me, Shelley, take it one day at a time. He's given me like he gave me a couple things to do for Black Friday weekend, big promotions I did. And now it's like, I'm waiting for kind of the next thing, and we'll just see.
Absolutely. I'm sure it'll be exciting, and I can't wait to follow along and see where you. I will include all of the links to your sites and offerings below this video so our readers can find you and learn more, get in on some of your classes, and take a look at some of the books that you've mentioned. Before we wrap up, I want to go over what I call the fun tidbit. There are just a few rapid fire questions off the top of your head, just to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Your favorite snack food?
Oh, I think right now it's, we have an air popper, and I love having popcorn with melted butter.
Oh, yeah. That's a guilty pleasure of mine, too. We have a popcorn maker in our media room, and the more melted butter, the better. Pay for it later, but.
Yeah.
Favorite musical artist?
Oh my goodness. I have so many, but I grew up in a musical family, but right now I'd say it's Mandisa because of her authenticity. She just went through a depression, and she, in her latest album, I just love her heart. She's just amazing.
Absolutely, she is. I'm a fan myself. Okay. Favorite book besides the Bible, or a book that you're reading now, not your own?
Oh my goodness. It's always so hard to think of like a favorite book. A book that was very impactful for me when I was coming out of my pornography addiction was Breaking Free by Beth Moore. And that was very powerful. And that was years and years and years ago. But, I read books all the time. I have so many. It's hard to just say one. But yeah, I primarily read nonfiction. I do read some fiction and enjoy that as well. But yeah, there's so many.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that is a good one. The Breaking Free. I've read that myself, and absolutely it applies to so many because we're all held bondage by something.
Yeah. In the art world, I recently read a book called Creative Call. It's a Christian book for artists, and then also The Artist's Way, which it's not a Christian book, it's a spiritual book, but both of those really were good for my art journey. So if you're into art, those might be.
I've read The Artist's Way. I've been involved in a Facebook group about it too, and there's a lot in there that applies no matter where you are in your spiritual walk or relationship. So those are great choices. I've not read The Creative Call, but I'll have to look into it.
Yeah.
Okay, a TV show that you just can't miss.
We actually don't watch television very much. We actually don't have cable, but I love Fixer Upper and I love Shark Tank. Being an entrepreneur myself, I love watching Shark Tank and just seeing all the ins and outs. But there's something about Fixer Upper and, Chip and Joanna Gaines. You just have to love them.
And that's the creative side in you with the design.
Yeah.
Coffee or tea?
Tea. I was always a coffee drinker, but in the last couple of years, I just it affected my body, and so I've transitioned now to tea, and my tea collection has grown dramatically. So my husband still drinks coffee though.
Okay. And one odd thing we probably don't know about you.
Oh man. I was a baton twirler when I was little, and I was also in a beauty pageant when I was in high school, but I didn't win. I was first runner up. And I actually think like that was a really good, humbling experience for me to learn, to not win and to not be everything. And, God just really taught me a lot through that. But with the baton, I was in a parade once and dropped my baton one time. And it was the one time that the paper took my picture, and they put that picture in the paper for everyone to see, that one mistake that I made. And so that was kind of a defining moment for my life, that the Lord has really, brought even more healing about that. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay. Like, there doesn't need to be like, I don't need to strive to be perfect, or, those sorts of things. So both of those experiences were interesting in that I was a failure of some sort, but I also learned so much through it.
And a reminder to be humble.
Yeah.
Through us, it's through God, that not our own efforts, but
Right.
well, that's awesome. Well, I thank you so much for your time. For our audience, Shelley has graciously offered a few giveaways. All the details and how to enter will be below this video. Be sure to check her out everywhere that you can find her online on social media. You will not be sorry. She has so much great content and wonderful bits and pieces of her testimony that are evident everywhere you find her online. So it's been my absolute pleasure to have you today, and I look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I do hope that all of you just really grasp who God has created you to be. You are created in His image. You are His son or daughter, and you are created to shine.
Absolutely.